Do we have any bill introductions? All right. Well, then we will get started with our budget hearing on emergency medical services with our research analyst, Merle Riedel.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Merle Riedel. I'm a fiscal analyst with Kansas Legislative Research. Today, I'll be reviewing the agency budget request and governor recommendation for the Emergency Medical Services Board. So you should have a document in front of you that looks like this with a blue band across the top. We're going to start on page 1. Just very quickly below the table, you'll see the mission of the Emergency Medical Service Board is to promote emergency medical services, or EMS, through consistent application of laws, provide support for the ambulance services, EMS professionals, and EMS education organizations in maintaining statutory and regulatory compliance, and to enhance out-of-hospital patient care through evidence-based practices. So you can see the best way to think of it is the agency certifies EMS professionals, licenses emergency equipment, and permits ambulance services. Professionals certified and trained by the agency include emergency medical technicians, paramedics, and instructor coordinators. I'm going to move on to page 3. On page 3, you'll see a table that lists categories of expenditures for the agency and lists the financing for the agency. You will note that this agency is primarily funded through the Emergency Medical Services Operating Fund, which primarily receives revenue from regulatory fees and a levy on fire insurance premiums. And that fund does function as the agency's primary operating fund. If you would move to page 6, we'll go into the analysis by fiscal year for the agency. So you'll see the table there shows the major adjustments, and I'll just quickly discuss them. Item number 1, legislative approved. Item number 1, no change. Subsequent to the 2022 session, no adjustments were made to the $2.6 million approved for the Emergency Medical Services Board in FY23. So the 2022 session approved $2.6 million, no subsequent changes to that. Next, we'll move on to the agency's estimate. The agency submits a revised estimate of $2.7 million, all from special revenue funds in FY 2023. This is an increase of $50,059 above the FY 2023 approved amount. The revised estimate includes 14 FTE positions, which is unchanged from the FY 2023 number. So we'll just quickly review some of the significant changes from the agency from last year's approved amount to the amount they're requesting in FY 23. So item number 2, EMS revolving grant fund. The revised estimate includes an increase of $58,741 from the EMS revolving grant fund, which provides additional financial assistance based on demonstrated need to local EMS agencies for the purchase of patient care equipment. A total of $364,991 is budgeted for this purpose in FY 2023. And the agency notes this increase is partially attributed to carryover funds from the previous fiscal year. So there was some funds in FY22 that were not expended and would carry over and be available in FY23. Item number 3, KEMSIS. The revised estimate includes an increase of $17,417 for information technology consulting, which primarily includes costs associated with the Kansas Emergency Medical Services Information System. The system allows EMS responders to report on the number and nature of ambulance calls. In early FY 2023, the agency achieved full participation of all ambulance services statewide. So this really allows ambulance services to submit statistical data related to the calls that they're conducting and allows the agency to do some analysis statewide on EMS services. Item 4, computing equipment. The revised estimate includes a decrease of $22,068 in capital outlay expenditures for computing equipment and software. And this is largely related to a server installation project that was planned for FY23, but they've now decided to shift that to a later date. Under item 5, you'll see all other adjustments. Other increases include expenditures for travel and information technology services, as well as legal fees for increased administrative hearings. This is offset by decreased expenditures for membership, particularly in a multi-state EMS compact. We'll talk a little bit about that in the next fiscal year. Due to that EMS compact waiving fees in FY 2023 as governance rules are established. And so what was the governor's recommendation? The governor concurred with the agency's request for FY 2023. So she's not recommending any changes from the agency's request in 23. If we move on to page 9, well, first, Mr. Chairman, I can stop, pause for questions, or I can proceed on to FY 2024.
Any questions for FY23? Yep. Representative Resman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 6, item 2, did you give a dollar figure for the amount that was rolled over? If you did,
I did not give you a dollar amount, but you'll see in the next fiscal year, it's about $18,000 that was unspent in FY22 and rolls over into FY23. 18, yeah.
okay. All right.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious because I don't know. In item 2, the patient care equipment, can you give me an idea of just what that would be?
So I think an example that I've heard used is defibrillators on a ambulance vehicle itself, or a variety of other so perhaps defibrillators, perhaps some of the patient beds that are used inside the ambulance. So sort of the hardened, durable equipment inside the ambulance.
And if I'm correct, that's just additional funds. It would appear to me that in the medical field, $58,000 wouldn't go very far.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So that is an increase of $58,741 for FY23. On that line, if you see the last sentence on item 2, it's a total of $364,909 is budgeted for this grant program. So that's 364. I don't know how far that will go. And for the purposes, but that's what's currently available to the agency.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions? All right, we'll move to FY24.
If we look on page 9, you'll see the FY 2024 analysis. The agency requests $3 million, all from special revenue funds, in expenditures for FY 2024. This is an increase of $346,261 above the FY23 revised estimate. The request includes 14 FTE positions for FY24, which is unchanged from the previous year. So some of those some of the changes we'll discuss. First, we'll discuss the agency's enhancement request. The agency requests a salary realignment, a request of $263,267 in salary and wages expenditures for a salary realignment effort to address recruiting and retention challenges for FY24. Agency reports difficulty with hiring due to the pay that is not competitive with the private sector. Many ambulance services are operated by private ventures, which creates somewhat competition for this agency if they can't provide adequate salary and wages. The enhancement is part of a larger agency effort to better align positions with sub-program purposes. The salary adjustment applies to all positions, so these would include compliance officers, investigators, and exam coordinators, and support staff and administrators. The next item you'll see is legal fees. The request includes an increase of $30,000 for legal fees for FY 2024. Kansas statute requires that the agency conduct administrative hearings on all regulatory matters concerning ambulance services. EMS providers, instructor coordinators, ambulance services, EMS providers, instructor coordinator. The agency anticipates an increase in the volume of such hearings, which requires additional utilization of contracted legal counsel. You'll see an increase in travel of $19,831 for FY24. The agency, in general, the agency anticipates increased travel related to education programs, examinations, technical assistance, and inspection and investigations, really as part of the outcome of COVID-19. So less restrictions related to the pandemic. Item 4 is membership fees. The request includes an increase of $50,077 in membership fees, which is primarily including membership in a multi-state EMS compact that allows for recognition of EMS licensure in 22 states and facilitates cross-border movement of provider. The EMS compact waives such fees in FY23, but the agency has no guarantees that those fees will be waived again in FY24. So really, to remain part of that membership, they have to budget for the full fee of membership. Moving on to page 10, computing equipment. The request includes $7,455 for capital outlay for computing equipment. Expenditures primarily involve replacement of equipment such as laptops, workstations, as part of the agency's 3-year IT management plan. Item 6, EMS revolving grant fund. The request includes a decrease of $18,741 from the EMS revolving grant fund, which we talked about, provides financial assistance based on demonstrated need to local EMS agencies. So that would provide a total of $346,250 is budgeted for this purpose in FY 2024, and the decrease is attributed, as Representative Hauser noted, and that is the carryover that was available in 23 and is not available in 24. We see other adjustments that include expenditures for employer contributions to fringe benefits, salary and wages expenditures for increased hours among 2 FTE part-time temporary exam coordinator positions. So what was the governor's recommendation? Governor recommends $2.8 million, all from special revenue funds for FY22. This is a decrease of $263,267 below the agency's request. The recommendation includes 14 FTE positions, which is unchanged from the agency's request. So really the change is the governor is not recommending the salary realignment plan. Moving on to page 11, you can see some additional details on that agency enhancement request related to their salary realignment plan. Again, it is $263,267. To address recruiting and retention challenges, agency reports recent efforts to fill vacant positions resulted in a large pool of qualified applicants. However, candidates ultimately accepted higher paying positions outside of state government. The agency does anticipate 4 FTE positions that will be eligible for retirement in 2024, which affords an opportunity to address these challenges agency-wide. And then finally, the following pages, you will see on page 14, there are some additional performance measures reported by the agency. And so, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation, so I'm happy to stand for questions.
Any questions on FY24? Representative Bloom.
Mr. Chairman, are you in competition with private companies?
Is the agency in competition with private companies? They might be able to respond better. I don't believe so. I don't believe there's private companies.
You mentioned something about private companies.
So the agency is staffed by people that work in the emergency medical services field. There are also private services that provide private corporations that provide EMS services. So the regulatory body, the EMS agency here, some of their staff could move to some of the private providers, but they're
not in competition with any of the private companies.
The positions would be in somewhat competition. Yes.
Thank you.
Further questions for the analyst? Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to follow up on Representative Bloom's direction of questioning, what percentage point are we looking at with respect to the differences in the private sector with relation to wage and what we have here in the agency.
Yeah. So you're, Mr. Chairman. So you're inquiring about what is the comparable versus the agency versus the private sector. I don't have that information, but I'm fairly certain the agency has analyzed that, and they'll be coming up shortly after me and can probably address that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. We will move into Joe House, the Executive Director of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. My name is Joe House. I'm the Executive Director of the Emergency Medical Services Board. Lots of familiar faces around, so won't go much more into that. More than happy to answer some of the questions that you've had. I think on the market comparison side of things. So my standard inspector starts roughly about $30,000 a year, and paramedic currently is starting somewhere around $75,000 to $76,000 a year. EMTs at some places are starting around $60,000 a year. So I'm about 50% off of what the market is for those positions right now. If we were to capture folks that could go elsewhere. The patient care equipment question, I think also that you had, Representative Carr, Mr. Chair. Yes, $18,000 doesn't go a whole lot in this equipment. Through the funding that we have available to us with that no limit appropriation, so what comes in feeds in every month throughout the year as it comes through, allows us to end up supporting about a total expenditure right around $1 million in equipment total. So there is a local share that comes into it. This is funding that we use to help offset their cost, drive down what that total price tag is. But it is absolutely what Merle explained. It's the monitors that they're using, cardiac monitors to follow through, the defibrillators, the cots that they're utilizing to transport the patients in, ventilators are another big choice that come through there. And so those are some big ticket items that roughly most of our counties can't necessarily afford right off the entire amount. So that grant helps offset that cost as it comes through. And then the competition on the private side of things, we are not in direct competition as a state agency with a private company, but I am competing for the same workforce as some of them are. I don't require my employees to be EMS certified necessarily, but in their technical role and moving forward, we need that expertise there when we're being required to provide technical advice to those services on how they should be operating in efficient manners and such going through. So the brunt of my testimony is actually just asking for a reinstatement of the enhancement request coming back through. Again, it was a great opportunity. That's the way we'll just term it. It's frustrating being down 5 folks right now. I've got 14 obviously allocated positions. I have 5 currently vacant at the moment. My folks are working their tails off just to make sure that things aren't being dropped right now. We are limited. We don't get to pay overtime within the state side of things. We get to give it to them in compensatory time, which only then further labors others while those folks are trying to get that time off as they go through. So we looked at it from all directions to try to find out what could we do within our organization. The budgetary subprograms that we came up with actually made a lot of sense to realign our organization to those programs, granting redundancy, granting resiliency. So giving 3 people within a budgetary subprogram equal responsibility, being able to divvy up the job between the 3 of them as they deem fit to get the job done. Then if we have one that leaves, now we have 2 that are fully trained. We're not having to worry about that just being vacant at that moment until we get it refilled, but being able to take on that load. And so that's the redundancy, the resiliency that we were looking to try to add with that. That did require significant alignment because, of course, duties would change where everyone would have equal responsibility and such, and we would look at equal pay for those positions coming through. So that is where we came up with the enhancement side of things going through. I'm more than happy to go into more detail on that if you'd like. Or answer any other questions that you may have related to our budget.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming today. I have a question on page 9, legal fees. You're requesting an increase of $30,000 for legal fees for FY24. Why do you believe there will be an increase in hearings?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. We have one case currently I say one case. It involves 9 individuals. Within our Office of Administrative Hearings, we anticipate it to continue into fiscal year 24. We're expecting it to probably go down the appellate process as well as we go through. And that is just time and effort going through. We also had an additional 200 disciplinary cases during this year that their hearing times would probably fall all within latter part of 23, first part of 24 as we go through. Those are mostly CE audits and such, but we're seeing an increase in being challenged on some of these decisions, and it's anticipated to a level. We hadn't necessarily looked at our continuing education audits strongly until the last 2 to 3 years, and we're finding that we've got about a 26% failure rate right now, which is disturbing. But we had to administrate those and provide that disciplinary action. So we're being challenged mainly because there's no case precedent at this point, but we anticipate that to continue for at least the next year or so.
Very good. Any further questions for the Executive Director? Representative Hauser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director, for your testimony. Questions on the pay enhancement. 14 FTEs, so we're going to split up evenly, I'd assume, the 20, whatever, 230. That's like $18,000 a head if you just 14 employees. And I can understand and appreciate that is a draw if you're starting out at $30,000 and are competing with $70,000 wages in the private. I can understand how to put you about, like you said, almost halfway up the scale a little bit. But my question is, does the Emergency Medical Services Operating Fund, is that going to be able to sustain that amount of pay increase over time?
So all of our projections, great question, are showing yes, it absolutely will. We've had a carryover balance each year and a growing ending balance within our operating fund. I believe there's a graph on.
That's what I was going to ask Merle. Merle, show me the numbers.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, there is a graph depicting the Emergency Medical Service Operating Fund and its balance. That would be on page 4. You would see the revenue to the fund, the expenditures in orange, and the yellow line depicts the ending balance. So you do see a trend upward.
Yeah, that pretty much answers my question. See, that's what I like about this agency is because it's not drawn out of the SGF, and that makes a lot of difference. So thank you, Mr. Director.
Appreciate the question. And yeah, the last thing we ever want to do is try to raise a fee or try to institute a fee to cover, and we don't have to do that with this enhancement at all.
Anything further? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
We will close the budget hearing on emergency medical services and open the budget hearing on the state fire marshal, and we'll go back to Merle.
Chairman, members of the committee, long time no see. Good to see you. I am Merle Riedel with Legislative Research Department. We're going to review the state fire marshal budget request and governor's recommendation. Similar document, you'll see fire marshal on the blue banner across the top. Moving down a little bit about the agency, the mission of the Office of the State Fire Marshal is to protect lives and property from the hazards of fire, explosion, natural disaster, and promote prevention, educational, and investigative activities to mitigate accidents, promote life safety, and deter crimes. 4 agency programs assist the agency's mission. That's the administrative, investigation, fire prevention, and emergency response programs. So we're going to move past the executive summary, and I would ask you to move to page 4. Again, you'll see a table of expenditures and financing, and that's broken down by categories of expenditure. You will note this agency is also a fee-funded agency. So the Fire Marshal Fee Fund is the primary source of funding for this agency. The majority of revenue to this fund is derived from a levy on fire insurance premiums. Very similar to the last agency that you just saw. They both come. The two agencies are somewhat unique. There's only a third entity that receives funding from this levy on fire insurance premiums. On the top of page 5, you'll see that similar analysis for the fire marshal fee fund, which depicts revenue, expenditures, and ending balances. Going to page 6 is the FY23 analysis. So you can see legislative approved item number 1. Subsequent to the 2022 session, there were no adjustments to the $7.2 million approved for the state fire marshal for FY 2023. The agency estimate for FY23, the agency requests a revised estimate of $8.4 million, all from special revenue funds in FY 2023. This is an increase of $1.2 million above the FY 2023 approved amount. The revised estimate includes 69.3 FTE positions, which is a decrease of 3 FTE positions below the approved number. The position decrease is mainly in the administration division and the fire prevention division. So some of those adjustments that reflect that $1.2 million increase, you'll see item 2, that is the Kansas Firefighter Recruitment and Safety Grant Program, ARPA, or American Rescue Plan Act funds. The revised estimate includes an increase of $1.2 million, all from federal ARPA funds. So these are part of the final COVID-19 relief federal bill, the American Rescue Plan Act. The agency received $1.2 million as aid to local governments through the Kansas Firefighter Recruitment and Safety Grant Program. This grant program provides no-match funds to volunteer or part-time fire departments, primarily for personal protective equipment. And this is personal protective equipment for firefighters. So think of something much more robust than just sort of the standard masks that we might be used to. For the FY22 legislature directed that these one-time federal monies be transferred to the agency in FY22 if such ARPA funds were available. The funds were certified as available and transferred in June 2022, which is the final month of FY22. So due to this timing, so they really only had those funds for about a month, and it would be really difficult to expend those funds in that amount of time. Due to this timing, the agency plans to expend these funds in FY23 to support approved grants to 96 local fire departments. Item number 2, the elevator safety fee fund transfer language. The agency requests language authorizing a discretionary transfer from the elevator safety fee fund to the fire marshal fee fund to reimburse startup expenditures associated with provisions of the 2022 HB 2005, which created the Elevator Safety Act. That act assigned certain duties to the state fire marshal related to licensing elevator maintenance installers, maintenance, and builders. However, revenue to the elevator safety fee fund is derived from licensing fees and penalties. Directed to the elevator safety fund, the agency anticipates collection of the revenue to begin in January 22. So just last month did the revenue to that fund begin. However, the agency is essentially stating they had startup costs in FY22 to get the program established. So they had to expend funds from the fire marshal fee fund. They're requesting the fire marshal fee fund to be reimbursed from the elevator safety fund. Item 4, all other adjustments. Other adjustments include decreased salary and wages expenditures and 3 FTE positions, which is offset primarily by increased expenditures for the purchase of laptop computers as part of the agency's 3-year replacement cycle. So what was the governor's recommendation? Governor recommended $8.4 million, all from special revenue funds in FY23, which is unchanged from the agency's request. Recommendation includes 69.3 FTE positions, which is unchanged. Essentially, the governor concurred with the agency's request. However, the governor did not recommend language authorizing that transfer from the fire marshal fee fund to the elevator safety fund. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes FY23. I can pause or move on.
Any questions for the analyst? Go to 24.
Right. If we look on page 9, we'll see the 24 analysis. The agency requests $8.1 million, all from special revenue funds. This is a decrease of $339,760 below the FY23 revised estimate. The request includes 70.3 FTE positions, which is an increase of 1 FTE position above the 2023 revised estimate. The additional FTE position is in the fire prevention division. So now we'll talk about some of those adjustments that bring us to that new number of 8.1 million. The first adjustment, you'll see the agency has an enhancement request, and this is for the Kansas Firefighter Recruitment and Safety Grant Program from their fee fund. The agency requests an enhancement of $300,000, all from the Fire Marshal Fee Fund, to aid local governments through that grant program. With this enhancement, a total of $400,000 would be available for that grant program in 24, which is the amount provided prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you'll remember last fiscal year, we discussed 1.2 million from ARPA funds. So those, again, are one-time funds that will no longer be available after 2023. So you can think of that as sort of an anomaly for that grant program that was unusual. So the agency is requesting funding to put it back at that pre-pandemic level. Item 2, again, the Kansas Firefighter Grant and Safety Program, ARPA. This adjustment is really to reflect that $1.2 million from ARPA funds is no longer available in FY24. So there would be a decrease for this agency in expenditures of $1.2 million. Item 3, salaries and wages. The request includes an increase of $232,635, all from special revenue funds for salary and wages expenditures in FY24. This includes an increase of $155,308, primarily for employer contributions for fringe benefits and the addition of 1 FTE position in the fire prevention division. Item 4 is the elevator safety program. The request includes an increase of $160,800, all from the elevator safety fee fund. So the agency is projecting that beginning January, they will begin to receive revenue into that fund. So they've budgeted expenditures from that fund. And this is really expenditures that include operation of a statewide elevator database and an online application process. So those manufacturers, installers wishing to be licensed as inspectors can apply through this application process. Item 4 is hazmat response equipment. The request includes an increase of $57,000 for the purchase of specialized hazardous material detection equipment and incident response training equipment for emergency response division, which involves 9 regional teams that respond and mitigate chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear incidents when they occur in local jurisdictions. Finally, item 6 relates to vehicles. The request includes a total increase of $25,000 for the purchase of vehicles. This actually includes an increase of $108,000 for the replacement of 4 passenger cars utilized by staff. This increase is partially offset by decreased expenditures of $83,000 for the purchase of trucks. So they purchased trucks in 23, and they do not plan to purchase those trucks in 24. These trucks include specialized vehicles for the investigation and emergency response divisions. So then if we look at the governor's recommendation, governor recommends $7.9 million, all from special revenue funds. This is a decrease of $200,000 below the agency's FY 2024 requested amount. The recommendation includes 70.3 FTEs, which is unchanged from the agency's request. So what was the difference? The governor modified or partially recommended the agency's enhancement request. The governor recommends an enhancement of $100,000, all from the Fire Marshal Fee Fund for the Kansas Firefighter Recruitment and Safety Grant Program in FY24. This is $200,000 below the agency's request. Recommendation would provide a total of $200,000 for grants in FY 2024. So that's a rundown of the analysis. You'll see on page 11, there is some more details about the agency's enhancement request for the Firefighter Recruitment and Safety Grant Program. In that second paragraph, I just want to highlight that the agency did note there are 650 fire departments in Kansas, of which 80% are volunteer operated. Agency indicates these fire departments, especially small rural volunteer departments, struggle with recruitment and retention of firefighters due to the lack of adequate funding for safety equipment. A full bunker gear, which is PPE used for firefighters, is estimated at $3,000 per person. Funds may also be used for an extractor washing machine, which is designed for cleaning bunker gear to mitigate exposure to carcinogenic residue. And just to note, that particular grant program that we're talking about started in FY 2007 at $200,000 from the Fire Marshal Fee Fund. It was suspended in FY 2021, and you can see the graph there. Gives you an idea of sort of the history of the last 5 years for that grant program. And it indicates the total, the last two lines on that table will tell you the total amount requested and then the total amount rewarded. Finally, if you look on pages 13 and 14, you will see performance measures for the agency, if you would like to review those. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my piece. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Questions on FY24? Got off easy. All right, we will move to Doug Jurgensen, the State Fire Marshal.
Chair, committee members, thank you for allowing me to appear before you today. My name is Doug Jorgensen. I'm currently the State Fire Marshal for Kansas. Our agency pretty much is tasked with public safety. We inspect to different rules and regulations for fire safety for a lot of different facilities in the state, schools, hospitals, care centers. We concentrate on where the young congregate and where the elderly congregate is a lot of what we do. In my presentation on the first page, you'll see our current org chart. It lists all the individual positions that we have in the agency and the divisions that those positions operate under. On page 3, just an agency overview. It again breaks down our staffing positions. We have approximately 33 positions in our headquarters office here in Topeka, but then we have 38 positions, both investigators and inspectors, that live out across the state, work out of their homes, and have assigned territories that they handle. Page 4, just a lot of the programs that we have. And I won't go into those. I'll just let the members read those. Page 5, a little update since 2022 session. We continue to try and move forward with our firefighter recruitment and safety grant. We think it's pretty critical, especially for the volunteer departments in the state. When we receive applications for past grants over the years, there's some volunteer departments in the state that their annual budget is maybe $10,000. And as Merle mentioned, if they want to buy a new set of pants, coat, helmet, and gloves, boots for a firefighter, that's upwards of $3,500 now. So it's very hard for them to replace that protective gear that those firefighters need. So we try and help them out with that. Something that's been added since 2022 is the elevator safety program. We're in the midst of working through that right now. We've started receiving applications for the people in the industry, and that's moving forward. Page 6, the investigation division, just some of the things that they've accomplished over the last year. A lot of training we provide to local agencies, a lot of the investigations we do, and we also have 2 auxiliary canines, and it shows the amount of responses that they did last year. Moving on to 7, prevention division. That's our fire and life safety division. Those are the ones that do all of the fire and life safety inspections for those facilities I previously mentioned. But we also do some training. We try and reach out to those facility groups and associations when they have their conferences and meetings, and try and give them an idea of what's involved with an inspection when we come, so that it helps them sort of prepare and have a better idea of what we're looking for when we show up at, whether it be a hospital, care home, or a school. Again, just some of the stats. It goes along with sort of the end of Merle's presentation on our priorities and what we try and accomplish throughout the year. Moving on to page 8, the prevention division. There's some information on the current elevator safety program. Again, something that was brand new to us, that we've implemented since the last session. We started accepting applications from the industry January 1 of this year. And so far, we've actually licensed 9 contractors, 14 inspectors, and 40 mechanics that they can do business and practice their trade in Kansas. And so far, the fees that have generated out of those is about $14,000. So not enough to run the program, but part of the bill also requires us to issue operation certifications for all the elevators and escalators in the state, and those are done annually. And right now, the fee for those is $100, and the industry estimates that there's maybe 10,000 or more units in the state. So we feel that the income we'll get from those annual certifications for those units will be sufficient to pay for the program going forward. Page 9, over past years, we did have an issue with local jurisdictions, local fire departments giving fire and life safety inspections back to us. In fact, in past years, the legislature has been gracious and let us actually bring on additional inspectors to handle this extra workload. But you can see for 2023 that those numbers are going to be way down, so we don't anticipate a problem with being able to handle those inspections for this year. Page 10, our emergency response division, our hazardous materials program. That's currently made up of 9 regional teams. We have 11 different fire departments across the state that participate in those teams, and we approximately have about 200 personnel rostered for those hazmat responses. And you can see a list of the training that our office has provided to those teams, and we allow other firefighters that aren't a member of our teams to also attend and participate in those trainings too. Moving on to page 11, the search and rescue program. Currently have 7 task forces in Kansas. We have 12 certified K9 teams. We have 42 agencies participating. We also have 6 doctors on our teams and 2 engineers, and our current total is about 440 personnel across the state to respond to floods, tornadoes, other types of disasters. And we also do respond out of state for a lot of the hurricanes and things on the southern coast. And again, more information. We responded to the Andover tornado last year, and we also responded to the Cottonwood Complex fire in Reno County to assist with searching of the homes that were destroyed and outbuildings in that fire. Page 12, our firefighter recruitment and safety grant. Again, we've shared information on that. We were very fortunate to get that $1.2 million from the legislature last session of ARPA dollars. It went a long way. We had 96 departments apply. We do require that they be current in some reporting software that our office has, and that they're also current in KDEM's, what they call CRMCS. It's a database where departments go in and actually list the type of equipment they have and what's available for mutual aid or to go out to other places in the state to assist. So we have those two requirements that they have to meet, but it's no match money. As you can see by the graph, the requests always come in much higher than the dollars we have, but and those dollars we pull from our actual fee fund. So we're using dollars that we could use for other things actually in the agency, but we feel they're well spent to help those volunteer departments going forward. Page 13, just a quick list of what the things that are allowed under that grant. One of the big things are they call them extractors in the industry, but they're commercial washing machines, because the coat and pants, those bunker gear, the material they're made out of and the thickness make them very heavy. And so you need an industrial type washing machine to clean those. Over the last few years, there's been an uptick in cancer in the fire service. And one of the things they believe is leading to that is when a firefighter leaves a fire and he goes to the next one and he puts that bunker gear back on again, he has residue from that previous fire and that he's inhaling and breathing in. And some of the volunteer folks, they throw that bunker gear in the back seat of their truck or their car or in their trunk, so that at times they're even exposing family members. So by putting these machines across the state, it allows them the ability to regularly clean that bunker gear and try and cut down on that propensity for cancer going forward. As of this year, we've been able to distribute 87 of those machines around the state. And out of the 20 that we allotted this year, 15 have already been installed, and the other 5 should be installed in the next week or so. Page 14, we have a state smoke alarm program that we've had for years, actually since 2014. And we use, again, some of our funds to purchase smoke alarms, and then we distribute those to local fire departments or civic groups, and then they go out into the community and actually install those. Since the program started, we've given out almost 10,000 alarms in the state, and look to continue, that program going forward. Page 15, just a breakdown of the years and how many alarms we've given out. You can see 21 and 20, there was a marked decrease, but that was because of COVID, and people didn't want anybody in their homes, and the firefighters and those different groups were reluctant to go into people's homes. So that's picking back up, and I think we're making some more progress with that going forward. Page 16, our financial outlook. A lot of what Merle's already shared. We're completely fee funded. We receive our operating funds from the insurance premium fund. And we basically operate on 2 6-month fiscal years, because those funds come into us in June and December each year. So we sort of have to look at our budget and budget things in a 6-month period instead of a 12-month period, because we don't always have funds for, that month 7 through 12 until we see how much we actually receive in either June or December. And the other thing I will point out is that our balance is deceiving sometimes, because when we have a balance in the fund, half of that we have to already use for the first 6 months of the next fiscal year. So we really don't have a $6 million balance in our fund. It's probably actually more about half of that, because we'll use about $3.5 million of that balance to start and get through the first 6 months of the next fiscal year, if that makes sense. Page 17, just our cash flow. Again, showing that balance I talked about, but and then some graphs with some other breakdowns on our funds, our expenditures, and lastly, on the last page, just support for the committee for the governor's $100,000 enhancement, so that we can provide $200,000 for our firefighter grant. And we also are going to try and introduce legislation this session to change the statute over our boiler inspection responsibilities. Just like everybody else, we've had a hard time recruiting and retaining people. And with our boiler inspectors, they have to meet some very high qualifications under the current statute. And we're trying to, I guess, add a more of an apprentice type position where we can bring people in that don't have all those qualifications, but then give them the on-the-job training and extra training they need nationally to bring them up to that level. So, and with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you for coming today. Turning to page 7 on the KLRD pamphlet, the elevator safety fee fund transfer language, and you may not have this information, but did the governor give an explanation of why she did not recommend that?
I'm unaware. I'm
Okay.
not sure why. And again, it's not a really big deal, but we just want to try and keep the book square. And so to start the program, we had to use some of our regular fee fund money to get it up and going, to buy computers and different things like that. And so as we bring money into the elevator fee fund, we just want to move whatever we spent out of our regular fee fund back into that and just sort of balance things is what that basically pertains to.
Any further questions for the fire marshal? Representative Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you know what those, because this was that request was for a discretionary transfer. Do you know what those startup costs were?
I think the initial startup costs were in the $15,000 to $20,000 range. Again, it's not a big amount, but it's just, again, just accounting purposes. We just, want to try and keep things even and be able to track everything that we're spending appropriately.
Representative Hauser.
No, sir. No question.
And if I can add to that, the other issue we have is, like I mentioned, right now we've taken in about $14,000 for this year, but we also have costs this year that we're still taking out of our fee fund. So there's going to be additional fee fund expenditures for the elevator program till we can collect enough money to actually pay for it. So it's not just what we spent last year, but there'll be continuing costs this year that'll be coming out of the fee fund for the elevator program too.
Representative Resman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On these machines that wash the bunker gear, you said that they're across the state. Do we have 100% coverage, or are we still working towards that?
We're still working towards that. We continue to, when we have those grant funds available, we continue to try, because that's sort of a priority on the cancer side of things, besides getting them good bunker gear. So we try and, whether we have 200,000 or 400,000, we try and set half of what we have aside for those. But then it depends on the requests, because we don't always get requests for those. And if we don't get enough requests to spend those dollars, then we'll move those dollars to the bunker gear. We also help support junior firefighter programs because especially the volunteers, they're just starting to have an issue with losing volunteers because of their age and people not volunteering. So we're trying to help them start junior firefighter programs where they can get the high school kids interested in firefighting and then try and get them to volunteer in their local departments.
You have any idea how long it'll take to cover 100% of the state?
Well, it just depends. There's like 600 and some fire departments in the state. 80% of those are volunteer.
But can they share?
Yes, and that's part of the program is that if we give them a machine, they agree to share that with surrounding departments. And we actually have a map at our office that shows where all these machines are. But there are places in Southwest Kansas, Northwest Kansas, and Southeast Kansas that's could still use a little more to cover the geographic area.
Yeah. You mentioned something about cancer that you're concerned about. Should a fireman or firewoman get cancer? Does that fall under any type of workers' compensation complaint?
I don't think at this time it does. I think that's one of the issues that's maybe was in last session and might be a bill in this session, is to recognize that as a workers' comp thing. But Merle might have more on that. I'm not sure.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have additional detail on that, but I can try to track that down for tomorrow.
I'm just concerned that I don't want to have to pay out of pocket or have it, if they have insurance to cover their injuries as a result of what's happened on the job.
And a lot of the volunteer departments don't have that. They don't have insurance for their volunteers. And so something does happen. There are some funds that will help with injuries and things like that. But again, it's whatever we can do to help the volunteer departments is what we try to do.
Can I just switch gears to the boiler fund? A couple of years ago, didn't we have to remove money from the boiler fund to cover your budget? Did I remember that correctly?
We didn't. We came close to that, but all we did was actually get language from the legislature that would allow us to use boiler funds for regular expenses if we needed to. And up so far to now, we have not had to do that.
And the boiler fund is fully, funded, or?
Yes. And there is a little bit of a surplus there, and it pays for all of our inspectors, their salaries, all the operating expenses, computers, vehicles, fuel, all those things like that are currently funded out of that fund. And we haven't needed to use that money on the fee fund side. I will, I guess on that note, on page 5 of Merle's handout, the graph at the top sort of shows that our expenditures have met our revenue and our ending balance. They've all sort of come together in 24. And the past 2 years, we've actually asked our budget committees for an increase in funding, define an increase in funding for us. But with 2 years of going through COVID, a big reduction in the amount of training we did, and some of the other things that COVID brought about, we've been able to build a balance back up a little bit. So the request for additional funding wasn't needed this year because we basically have about a $3 million balance in our fund. But going forward, maybe even next year, we might be back with that request to see if the legislature can help us identify some additional funding.
Anything further? All right. Thank you very much. Well, that concludes our budget hearing on the state fire marshal. We will be meeting tomorrow for recommendations on both of these that we heard today. And I will also I'll have Diane send out an email to the committee on all of our report out dates, our hearings, and recommendations. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to put out for you and for any members, if someone does have a recommendation they're thinking and they would like any assistance crafting that, you can let me know or let Diane know, and she can get a hold of me, and I can help wordsmith something for you for tomorrow if you like.
All right. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.